Hey everyone, I'm SpencerFan937, and today I'm reviewing Mike the Arlesdale Engine. So, a little backstory on Mike before I get into all the details of the model itself. Mike is actually not a standard gauge engine. So, all the engines you see behind you, Thomas and everyone else on the Northwestern Railway, they are actually standard gauge engines, um, which is, as the name implies, sort of the standard model, standard shape and size for locomotives around the world. But Mike is actually a much smaller engine. He is what they call a minimum gauge engine, or I think it's a 15-inch gauge or something like that. So Mike is much smaller than most of his other counterparts on the island of Sodor. And that is because he works on a minimum gauge railway, the Arlesdale Railway, which is evident from his tender there. So the Arlesdale Railway is actually this sort of sub railway that's located somewhere, I think, close to the middle of Sodor, and it's, I'm pretty sure, co-owned by all the other big railways on the island, like the Northwestern Railway, which is obviously Sir Topham Hatt's railway. It's where Thomas and all his friends work, and the Skarloey Railway, among others. So that's the Arlesdale Railway, and I'm pretty sure it's pretty small. I think it's just like one or two lines. It's not too big, and I think they mostly just do shunting work, but they also do some tourism too with passengers and open top coaches. Um, some history on Mike. Mike obviously primarily works on the Arlesdale Railway, which actually has a lot of other engines too. So Mike first appeared in the Railway series books. This was, I don't know, way back in the, like the, I don't know, like the 90s, 80s, probably before then. Um, at least that's like, I don't know when the books actually came out. I'm pretty sure the books came out much earlier than that. But in terms of his character appearance, I think his last appearance was sometime in like the 90s, canonically speaking. But there are some other engines who work on the Arlesdale Railway, at least in the Railway series. Among them are Rex, Bert, Jock, and Frank. Frank actually had his own TWR model that was based on the Railway series character. However, because Frank was never revived for the television series, his model was retired shortly afterwards. Unfortunately, I do not have Frank with me right now. I don't know if I ever will, but if you do have a Frank, please let me know. I'll be interested to know if you do. Anyways, so that's pretty much the Arlesdale Railway and where Mike works. Mike unfortunately didn't actually appear in the model series of the television show, so we made no appearances in the live action part of Thomas and Friends, the show. However, he would appear in the animated series of the Thomas and Friends show, and I think he actually appeared in a movie, and it was the movie that introduced us to Sailor John, actually. So Mike, although he didn't appear in the model series, he did appear in Sodor's Legend of the Lost Treasure, which came out, I think it's 10 years ago at this point. So back in 2015, when Sodor's Legend of the Lost Treasure came out, Mike was actually one of the new characters, new with quotation marks, that was introduced into the television series, and that is how he made his television series debut. Some other engines in the Arlesdale Railway also appeared, but I'm pretty sure only Rex and Bert were the engines in that movie. I don't think Jock or Frank made any appearances or anything like that. But I'm sure they only had so many characters they could fit into that movie. Um, I don't know the last time Mike appeared in the show, but yeah, I know he's been a character since then, which is pretty cool because usually they don't bring back characters from the Railway series in the new animated show. So that's pretty cool. And I say new, even though the movie came out 10 years ago, but I guess that's either here nor there. Anyways, back to the actual model of Mike. So this particular model actually came out in the 1990s, so it is older than me and probably you. Uh, so this model, well, let's check the wheels here. So this model, let's see. So my camera cooperates or not today. There we go. So as you can see there, This model came out in 1998, so definitely one of the older models of Mike. Interestingly, Mike actually did have a new model come out back in 2015 in correlation with the movie Soda's Legend of the Lost Treasure. I do not have that model, and I've seen pictures of it though, and I'd argue it's actually more true to the actual character of Mike, his make and build. Nevertheless, I have always liked this model and always had sort of a soft spot for it. Um, and yeah, I thought it was pretty nice. This particular one was retired in 2005, and the new one, which I don't have, came out 10 years later in 2015 in correlation with the movie. Um, so, pretty good shelf life for Mike here. So let's get to the model itself. So I think we could start with the side here of the actual engine itself. We can zoom in here a little bit. So Mike has just 3 wheels there. And on the surface, he has a pretty basic build, but I think it looks pretty nice. He has a plastic dome there. It's actually kind of stubby, which is which is kind of cool. Quite fitting for a minimum gauge engine. It connects to a boiler, which bears his name, Mike. And on top of it lies a golden, or I guess yellow, dome, which is made of plastic. That eventually, through this thing here, I'm not quite sure what this is, but it has a dome made out of wood on top of it, just this tiny stubby red dome. Um, so that was kind of part of the carving there. That all eventually connects to the cab, which sports 2 nice windows there, or maybe just like one window with a line in the middle. And on the bottom there, you have this cool symbol that, I don't know, just makes for a cool design. The design is similar for the cab somewhat to the newer one. Although this one, it's like, I think the cab is actually taller on the newer model. Obviously, it's the same on the opposite side. And on the back, there's really not much to write home about. Pretty typical stuff. They have this like flat edge here for some reason. I don't know what that's about. But, you don't really notice it actually, interestingly, when you connect it to the tender. So if you see here, it kind of just blends in. So it's not that big of a deal. Before I go on to the tender, if you want to look at his face there, Mike kind of has this, I don't know, this sort of interesting expression. It's not too standard, not too ordinary. It's quite interesting. Unfortunately, this model has seen better days. It has some wear and tear on it. So there used to be eyebrows on there at some point. You can't quite see them anymore. But nevertheless, I think he has a pretty cool face, and I think it's quite appropriate for this sort of ambiguous character that didn't really have much appearances. So, maybe he's cheeky or thinking about plotting something, or maybe he's just giving you a nice smile. I don't know. So that is Mike, the model. And if you want to look at his tender here, I mentioned before it has Arlesdale written on it quite prominently, which I think is pretty nice. I think the font is pretty cool. I also like the blue color on it. That's a nice touch. Um, Plastic hole on the top there. You have this interesting edge that's sort of just going up like that on the front, and on the back it goes down a bit. It's quite smooth here actually, and it becomes flat once again. So neither of these have anything written on the bottom. Most of the older engines didn't. That includes the tender, of course. So So yeah, definitely an older model. Definitely one of the older ones I have in my collection, anyways. But still, one of my personal favorites, actually. And I always thought that, obviously they couldn't make Mike physically smaller than the other standard gauge engines because that would require making the track smaller. Because, like the track that they use, and as you see here, for Thomas Rhine Railway, it has to be all the same for all the engines. So they couldn't make him physically smaller, but I thought they did a good job doing their best at that or making him appear smaller anyways. If you don't know much about Mike, you certainly get the sense that he's smaller, or at the very least, like, has some size differences, and, the boiler or things like that, the funnel. So I think they did a good job at sort of expressing that, because, you couldn't make a whole new track line as part of Thomas Rhine Railway, because it just wouldn't work. Anyways, so that is Mike the Arlesdale engine. Personally, I like this model a lot. I think it's pretty cool. It's nice to have, and he's a pretty cool red engine. No offense to James. But what do you think about Mike? Do you like Mike? Do you think he's a cool character, and do you think his model is accurate, or do you think he's overrated and that no one should ever buy his model? Tell me what you think in the comments below. Also, while you're there, consider liking this video if you enjoyed it and subscribing to the channel. Thank you very much for watching.